Hi there, and this is part 3 of my analysis of recently uploaded transmission Crystalline, Samhain 1111 Stargate, November 11th, 2019. So the next part of this is addressed to the service to self individuals, which I spoke about in the last 2 parts. So I'll read the next bit. To those who remain as intentional creators, who do not choose to experience portals of light, but instead utilise the collective energies and light streams of others through a service to self choice point. So let's just break that down to there. To those who remain as intentional creators, who do not choose to experience portals of light, but instead utilise the collective energies and light streams of others through a service to self choice point. So the 9 are addressing this here to individuals who are intentional creators. So we're looking at a service to self structure. The individuals within the service to self structure are intentional creators. They're creating something. It's not the same creation as us that we're creating, the service to others, positive polarized individuals, but they are creating something intentionally. They do not choose to experience portals of light. That doesn't mean they don't know about them, that they're not aware that those portals exist and those energies are there, but they choose not to experience them. It's a choice, a conscious choice. Not for all of the entire service to self structure, of course. There are many within the service to self structure who don't know about portals, don't believe in portals, but those within the sort of higher part of that pyramidical structure, they would know about these and understand about them, and they would choose not to experience the portals of light, but instead, at the times of those portals and at other times as well, their sine wave moves in a different pattern, a different configuration to the service to others sine wave, but there are times that coincide. So, which causes misunderstandings amongst truthers and some light workers, because similar dates and number sequences and festivals and times within the calendar are recognised by the service to self individuals, and those same days are recognised by service to others individuals. They would be perceived and experienced and acknowledged differently, but often they're the same dates, the same number sequences, so that can cause confusion amongst people looking for truth. They might realise that these dates are so important to service to self individuals and used by the Illuminati, the deep state, and then when they see someone perhaps in New Age movement utilising or talking about the same dates, then they automatically perceive those individuals as all being the same and of the dark or whatever. So that can cause confusion, because there is awareness amongst the service to self structure within the higher echelons of that pyramidical structure. So, as I said, they choose not to experience portals of light, but instead, at the same time, doesn't say that, but instead they choose to utilize the collective energies and light streams of others. So at the times of the portals, rather than utilizing the portal energy, the cosmic energy, that's when they turn to moving into siphoning energy from others, and they start activating or working with that inverted matrix. So that's why things can occur during these dates that are disaster events or false flags, that sort of thing, can occur at those times. It's not that they're utilising the portal energy. The portal energy isn't appropriate for them. That's when they move in and begin to siphon energy from others who are experiencing the portal energy through the inverted matrix system, the trapping systems. So the 9 is saying they're addressing this part of the transmission to those people. Now, the reason why they're doing that is A, to literally address to those individuals, in case some of them do actually watch the transmission. They are addressing them. But they're also showing those interested starseeds and light workers of positive polarization the perspective of the service to self individuals. They're addressing them so that the aware individuals within positive polarization can understand, or at least share or see part of that perspective. So instead of using or experiencing the portals of light, they utilize collective energies and light streams, that radiating light of others, through a service to self choice point. So we know it's through a service to self polarization, a negative polarization, and they use the word choice point, meaning it's a choice. They've chosen. Now, many have not made that choice consciously from the incarnated physical perspective. They've been forced into that choice. They are as hijacked, if not more so, than the general population. Those within the higher echelons of that pyramidal structure have made a choice. Maybe not all of those either. Some of those individuals may be forced into that, but there are those who've made a choice on a physical level and on a soul level to actually experience this service to self reality. So this is what the 9 are saying to those individuals. We say to you that the utilization of that which you feed on rapidly becomes less and less. So let's break that down. The utilization of that which you feed on, well, that which you feed on is others, is the energy of others, the vulnerability of others, the innocence of others, and others who utilize and radiate their light without quite understanding how to focus or how to bypass those trapping systems, and those that don't utilize light at all. So this is the general population of individuals who are not in that state of mastery whereby they are untouchable, they are unhijackable, if you like. The utilization of that which you feed on, which is a collective energy of the general population, and their innocence and their lack of awareness and their ignorance and their contribution towards the creation of the service to self template, without them realizing that they're contributing towards it, that structure which they feed on rapidly becomes less and less. So it's like the structure is, say, this big, and it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Why? Well, the 9 go on to say, as the prophesied grid structures move into pattern and form beyond even the comprehension of your most enlightened and illumined masters. So the prophesied grid structures. So there is a prophecy in place. There is that which has been known for millennia. The grid structures are the structures of the consciousness of planet Earth, humanity and beyond, but predominantly planet Earth and humanity. The grid structures and the consciousness of the geological Earth and the biological beings upon the earth, the humans, the animals, the grid structure, which is the consciousness of that, of the geology of the earth and the biology of the living organic structures. That consciousness is a grid, and the structures within that consciousness move into pattern and form. So there is a geometric configuration within that consciousness that is the geology of the planet and the intelligence of the planet, the consciousness and awareness of the planet, and of the organic structures on the planet, the humans, the animals, the plant kingdom. There is a certain geometric structure within that grid, and that geometry moves from one type of geometry, which is a hijacked geometry, into pattern and form, into a new pattern, a new geometric structure, beyond even the comprehension of your most enlightened and illumined masters. So we're talking about those right at the top of the pyramidal structure, of the service to self pyramidal structure, those behind the faces you see. So everyone you see that's within the deep state, these individuals are behind them. These are the puppet masters. These are the controllers that control the structure. You never see them, you never hear of them. They are working behind the scenes. They are subterranean, the Nine would say, in their location. The interpretation of that could well mean that they are in caves under the water, literally subterranean, that they're in giant submarines floating around in the ocean. They could be off planet, or they could be within the Earth itself, underground, in a hollow Earth type of presentation. And geologically, third dimensionally, the Nine tell me that the Earth is not hollow in the sense of a round sphere with an entire hollow middle. It is more like a series of subterranean and underground cave structures, some which were naturally formed with the birth of the planet or the life of the planet, and others which have been hollowed out with extraterrestrial machinery, and others which have been created by advanced technologies created by people on Earth. So it's quite a mix. I think some people have described this as a honeycomb structure, and that's kind of what the Nine are saying that the Earth is. So subterranean could be that they are underneath the surface of the Earth, within this honeycomb structure, within these systems. But again, that could mean actually under the water, in underground systems that are under the ocean, or in machinery under the ocean. Or it could also mean outside of Earth at all, completely, as in off-planet. So that's where they're located, these enlightened and illumined masters that are behind the scenes and at the top of the pyramid. So the Nine go on to address this structure, these individuals, by saying, it is the child on the street, if you will, the ones you have called ignorant and profane, that shall rise above you to heights unimagined by your most powerful priests of darkness. So the child on the street, well, that's the everyday person. Many of them children. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're all children, many of them are adults, but the child on the street encompasses children. And you imagine a little sort of child on the street as in somebody with not much money, perhaps sort of hasn't even got a house, lives on the streets, as in you don't have to look to the wealthy, you don't have to look to the power structures, to the corporate machine to find these individuals. It could be the little urchin sitting in a puddle, you know, with nothing but an apple to eat or whatever. You know, within poverty structures you will find these individuals, the average individual, the child on the street, if you will. So child on the street being metaphoric here, as in the everyday person in all walks of life. That's what the Nine mean. The everyday person, both adult and child, in all walks of life. the ones you have called ignorant and profane. So this service to self structure has actually literally referred to the everyday person as ignorant and as profane. And instead of calling them, you know, Earth's humanity or God's children or whatever, it's the ignorant, the profane, as if that's everyone else but them. Shall rise above you to heights unimagined. So we're looking at these geometric grid structures, these patterns and forms that are a complicated geometry that are beyond the comprehension of your most enlightened and illumined masters, so beyond the comprehension of the service to self individuals at the top of that pyramidal structure. And yet we have here the child on the street, referred to as ignorant and profane, that shall rise above you to heights unimagined. That suggests that it is the individual on the street that will decode the new geometries of the prophesied grid structures and understand what those grid structures are and what those geometries mean, and work with them in ways that they cannot, and in ways that they cannot understand. And of course that is happening. You have the everyday person on the street that is able to decode this geometric code that sits within the consciousness of planet Earth and of humanity and beyond, that is not decodable by these high enlightened and illumined masters. They just don't have the expansion to be able to decode the geometry. And the reason why, or one of the reasons why, is because this geometry is a fifth dimensional frequency, also known as the fabric of fourth density. And it is a heart-centered frequency. The geometries are heart-created, flower of life, heart geometry frequencies. They match the emotions of bliss and euphoria and ecstasy. And you have to be in an expanded, polarized, positive service to others vibration in order to access and decode that geometry, because it's created by those who are in a positive polarization and who experience bliss, ecstasy and euphoria in order to create a vibrational match in a dimensional and density form, as in the geological form of ecstasy, bliss and euphoria. So it goes above the higher enlightened and illumined masters at the top of that pyramidal structure, because they can't reach that frequency because they don't have activated hearts. They have highly developed pineal gland, third eye chakra systems, and they have highly developed solar plexus power centers, but they do not develop the heart. If they were to develop the heart, they wouldn't be negatively polarized anymore, because the heart comes from love and compassion and forgiveness, and they are positively polarized emotions. So they can't access this geometry, but the child on the street can. Metaphorically, the child on the street, the everyday person who feels love and compassion and forgiveness, can access the geometric code of these prophesied grid structures because they created them. They are at one with them through the law of one. So the Nine is saying here, they shall rise above you to heights unimagined by your most powerful priests of darkness. The priests of darkness being these enlightened and illumined masters at the top of the pyramidal structure, the service to self, negatively polarized structure. Heights unimagined. So this would suggest, and I know that this is what the Nine are meaning here, by giving you the code of this transmission for you to go away and unravel these layers, which I am doing for you through my own perspective. So I can't unravel all the layers through your perspective. There may be layers within your perspective that come to the fore that I haven't seen. But what I would say in my own perception here of the analysis is heights unimagined would suggest that the service to self structure and those that are controlling that structure, the enlightened and illumined masters, and we're talking about individuals on planet, off planet, humans, or rather incarnated as a human organism, but we're also looking at extraterrestrial entities and fourth dimensional entities. It makes up there's a whole group. It's not just humans on Earth. There are other entities behind the humans on Earth controlling them. So there's a layer of controllers within that higher echelon of the top of the pyramidical structure. So powerful priests of darkness. They have not even been aware on any level of the heights that these children on the street would rise to. So they do have technology where they're able to see timelines and probabilities and get some idea of what is coming and look at these prophecies, if you will, or prophesied events that may occur on this planet or outside or around this planet. And even within all of the timeline viewing technologies that they have, they did not see or imagine these heights. Now, the reason why these heights have not been imagined, these heights that these individuals shall rise to be able to decode this geometry, is because when you speak or deliver information or even think information, it goes into this collective grid and can be seen. So any thought you have, any awareness you have, any epiphany you have, any creational idea that you have can be seen, utilized. It can be worked with. It's no longer hidden. It goes into that grid, and their technologies can see these. These heights unimagined that the Nine are speaking about were hidden from everyone. So not even a single starseed would be able to think of this heights unimagined, so that it wouldn't go into the grid and be seen. So the heights unimagined are that which has not even been told to the starseeds. It is a living as you go vibration. It occurs as you live. It is a day by day. You know, if you were looking at technology, pay as you go. You don't find it or access it beforehand. It occurs in the moment. And that is why alignment and resonation to frequency is so important for the starseeds, because they're being led through this. They're being led through this in real time, if you will. So what I mean by that is, when you incarnate as a starseed, or someone who is set on the path to be an aware starseed, or someone who's on an ascension timeline incarnation, and you are able to access higher dimensional truths either through channeling, memory, recall, connecting with the Akashic records, whatever that may be. If you were to imagine a being that was overseeing that process and looking down onto the earth, onto the incarnational dimension and all the starseeds that have incarnated, and that being had ultimate knowledge, that being is going to think to itself, I can't give all the knowledge to these starseeds all in one go, while these individuals over here, these service to self individuals, have technology to be able to look at the starseeds' minds and memories, if you like. So they would keep that information so that no individual has that very thought, so that it can't be read in the fields. This is why sometimes you might listen to a spiritual teacher and they might stop and say, oh, I've got to be careful what I say. Because sometimes when you're aware of all of this, you're aware that there are thought structures that are only just coming into the reality right now, and you work out what you can sort of say or perceive without being able to put that into the grid so that it can be taken, read, hijacked or seen. So anyone who's worked with higher dimensional guidance systems will know this. They will have been trained in this within their connection with that higher guidance system. So they will know how to say things in ways that don't bring down that which needs to remain unseen, unsaid, unprocessed. Sitting there in potential, and you learn about timing. That's divine timing. You will hear people say all the time, in divine timing. That's what it means. Divine timing is when something comes in real time. So you live that experience, and that piece of information or knowledge is downloaded to you when it is safe to do so. It can no longer be stolen, hijacked, taken, utilized, distorted when it comes in divine timing, because as it comes forward, it's too late for that service to self structure to be able to use it. I mean, the 9 go on to discuss this more in the next part of this transmission. And the next part is, they ride upon the waves of innocence, those very same waves that he who came before them, the ones they called Jeshua and Melchizedek, and all their Essene brethren did ride upon. So these children on the street, these aware individuals, ride upon the waves of innocence. So metaphoric for an innocence, an unknowing, an open heart. Innocence comes with wonder. It's not innocence in the sense of ignorance or gullibility, although there is a certain amount of that and there is a positive aspect to that. But when the 9 utilise the word innocence here, what they're meaning to say is this childlike wonder and an uncorrupted mind, if you will, purity, the frequency of the unicorn, that pure energy. They ride upon the waves of innocence, those very same waves that he who came before them, so the same waves of innocence that he who came before them, and then they refer to the ones they called Jeshua and Melchizedek. So we are looking at beings that have incarnated on this planet before, and have also ridden those waves of innocence and paved the way for those to follow. Being able to live in real time, drawing down these downloads in divine timing, so that by the time those downloads and those epiphanies and those knowings and that knowledge comes into their minds, it is too late for it to be hijacked or utilised by a service to self structure. Because by the time it comes in, it can't be utilised. It can't be hijacked. It's too late. And there are layers and layers and layers behind that, which I could go into, but as I said, I would be sat here all day. They ride upon the waves of innocence, those very same...
Okay, so what happened there was rather strange. So in the middle of recording, all of a sudden, all the sockets, all the electricity apart from the lights went off in the entire house, just kaput. Everything went off, the computer, the camera, the cooker, the television, my daughter's computer, everything went off. Took us ages to work out what had actually happened and which plug was actually, tripping the system. So by the time that was sorted out, it was the evening. So today it's the next day. So I'm carrying on where I left off, but I'd just like to talk about that for a little moment. This sort of thing can happen when you are in the middle of creating something that is going to make a change or going to make waves within that critical mass positive polarization that I've been talking about. So you could be making a film or making artwork or some co-creation, some collaboration, or recording a video like this. This can happen. Now, you can either find that you have synchronistic events that occur within the positive polarization. So it's almost as though the universal energy, that universal intelligence, is assisting you. And all these things happen just by magic. You'll meet people that can do exactly what you want them to do within your collaboration or project. Or these magical things happen, and it's almost like you think to yourself, wow, something is really helping me to get this project done. It's divinely orchestrated. But it can also happen on the opposite vibration, and that is that everything seems to go wrong. Things seem to stop what you are doing. Things seem to prevent what you're doing. Technology breaks down right in the middle of you recording something, or you'll write something and then you'll lose that piece of writing. These things can happen as well. People drop out of your project or whatever it may be. Sometimes both of these, and usually if you are in a balanced vibratory state within your incarnation, both of these can happen. So good things are happening to assist your project, and then negative things are occurring to prevent you creating your project. All of this is quite normal when you are creating. I mean, say normal, probably not to the average person, but to the creative, spiritually aware starseed who is creating work that will create a ripple through that positive polarization field and will assist in the raising of the vibration of this planet and all of humanity and the awareness of humanity. When you're assisting with that, then it's quite normal to have these two opposing forces working at the same time. You could say you have angels and ascended masters and higher light beings helping you with your project, and you've got demons and dark malevolent forces and reptilian beings, or however you want to explain that intelligent energy, working against you to prevent you from creating your project. That's one way of explaining it when you're using the intelligence or personality presentations of the universal matrix. Another way of explaining that would be that you are projecting forward, and this is what I was talking about in the last couple of parts to this analysis. You're projecting forward into your reality the aspects of you that are the creative, positive aspects and the shadow aspects. Or you could also say that because you are living within a dualistic reality of polarization, then you exist within that polarity. Now you can rise above that polarity and go into that balance where you yourself are not in a polarized state, but you are still incarnated in a physical body with polarization. So it's nothing to be scared of when these things happen, and it's nothing to be freaked out about, like, oh, the plugs all went off and all the sockets didn't work and something out there is trying to stop me from doing my project. Yes, but it's nothing to get freaked about. It's normal, and that's the way to deal with it, because I do know people who will freak out about this and go into a really ungrounded state and be like, well, I was trying to write this or create this and this happened, and they're out there trying to get me. And you can go a little bit into paranoia, and whilst that's true, on one level, the way to deal with it is to be, you know, that's reality, that's dualism, okay. Be grateful, thank you to all the different vibratory essences and intelligences that are assisting me. Now, the way forward when this happens is to turn it into something positive. So right now, I'm now talking about this to you, which wasn't my plan when I started to do the analysis of this transmission. But because this happened, I'm now explaining it to you. And then there's a whole other sort of teaching coming in. Now, was that the dark forces preventing me from doing my transmission, doing my analysis, and now they're really cross because I've gone and used it as a teaching? Or was it the higher dimensional energies that were stopping everything from working so that I could then present this teaching? The answer is it's both of those working together. It's all the same energy. And when you look at that whole sort of spectrum, love and fear, if you like, you are looking at a spectrum that is a unified spectrum. It isn't a case of this is a separate angelic being and this is a separate demonic being and they're having a fight. Yes, you can see it that way, but when you see it that way, you are still in separation, even though you're in a fourth dimensional perspective rather than a third dimensional one, because you're seeing those entities in the first place, those energies in the first place. When you see that as a unified spectrum, then you can embrace all of that spectrum in your own personal reality and also in the global reality. Now, that doesn't mean that you embrace all darkness as if it's wonderful. This is a bit of a misconception. I've had people write to me and say to me, and I'll discuss this in this analysis later, what happens when you embrace the darkness, you embrace that negative side? Well, what about really awful things that happened, like cruelty to animals, the exploitation of animals, corruption, you know, worse things than that? Are we supposed to just, yay, we embrace it all, we love all that corruption and that darkness and that anger and that violence? And no. That's not what it means. It means embrace your own personal shadow with love, with acceptance, with gratitude, with forgiveness, but you still stand strong with things that are outside of that service to others polarization that we are collectively creating as we move forward within this ascension timeline. So you would stand strong within judgment, but it isn't judgment as in I judge you. I judge you, and I judge you as wrong and criminal, and you are awful, and that's what I judge. I mean, yes, that is the way it manifests within the third dimension, but your judgment would be more like an indigo warrior assertiveness. It is he who carries the sword, Excalibur, the warrior, who says no more. I love you. You are part of my reality. You are part of me. You are a universal cosmic child of God force energy, of source. But I will not stand by and allow this to be tolerated. I will stand up for those who are oppressed and those who have no voice, be it the animals, the children, those that are led astray, and those that are hijacked. So it's a strength. That's the judgment. The judgment is a boundary. That's what judgment is. It's a boundary, as in you know. But it's done in a, it isn't done with retribution or anger, because you're going out of balance when you go into these feelings. It's easier said than done, I know, and every single one of us, me included, will at some time have lost the ability to stay within that balance. I'm just presenting to you the ideal and the way the nine teach me, and for us to do our best to live that and to have the intention of living that. That doesn't mean we're perfect. So I have gone off on a tangent with this analysis, although obviously it is connected to the material. Interestingly enough, the other point to look at is, well, what was I, talking about when the electricity, when all the sockets sort of tripped and went off? What was I discussing? So the last thing I had said here is they ride upon the waves of innocence. talking about those who came before, those very same waves that he who came before them, so he as in a person, the ones, so the 9 then go into that one person is several people. I will explain what that means in a second. The ones they called Jeshua and Melchizedek, and all their Essene brethren did ride upon. So we're speaking here about powerful service to others, positive polarization intelligences that have incarnated on this planet and created a very large reverberation of energy or wave of energy through their incarnations within that positive polarization. So we're talking about they ride upon the waves of innocence, those very same waves. So the waves of innocence are what I explained about in the last part, those waves of purity, of innocence, of wonder that the star seeds intrinsically hold, and they move into that more and more and more as they become more and more activated, the energy of the unicorn, if you will. They ride upon the waves of innocence, those very same waves that he who came before them did ride upon. He who came before them, as in one person. Then the 9 move into the ones they called Jeshua and Melchizedek and all their Essene brethren did ride upon. So what they're saying here is, in the collective consciousness of humanity, or within the collective consciousness within a high majority field enough to create critical mass, there is an awareness of he who came before, and that is Jeshua, Jesus Christ, he who came before. It doesn't matter whether that was an actual person that lived, as it says in the Bible, or if it was not. It is an energetic projection within within humanity's consciousness that creates that entity, is Jesus Christ. Then when they move into the ones they called Jeshua and Melchizedek and their Essene brethren, what they're doing here is showing the collective group of individuals. Within that group, some of those individuals were sort of prophets, leaders, if you like. Within that service to others, positive polarization, they incarnated upon that positive polarization with DNA fields intact, the higher DNA configuration intact. And so they had memory intact and knowing, and they had the ability to trigger those memories. There were star seeds, but there were less of them then than there are now. And the 9 have told me that in the Bible, in the biblical texts and other texts connected to the Bible, there were actually several individuals, and they specifically mentioned 5. 3 were men and 2 were women, and they all encompass the Christ consciousness. They were the early star seeds, but they were living in that avatar experience, if you will, where those DNA filaments were already intact within their incarnation when they were born, and they were able to access that memory. And names that are given to these individuals, one is Jeshua, one is Melchizedek, then there are others. So there are these 5 individuals specifically, and all their Essene brethren. So these are known as the Essenes. You can go and research the Essenes, and the 9 are telling me sort of 80 to 85% of information available is accurate information. You use your own resonance and alignment when you're researching this to work out what is accurate and what is a distortion. But around 85% availability of accurate information is out there, which is really high, actually. So what we're looking at here is the Essene brethren. The Essenes were a collective group, all working within the positive polarization field, knowing what was coming, knowing about the future from their perspective, knowing about this time that we're in now, the ascension timeline. They may have had different names for that, but they knew that this would be collective. In fact, in the Bible, Jesus says, all these things I do, so you shall do, and greater, or and better, something like that. I'm not sure of the exact quote, but it means that everything I'm doing, all these miracles that I am conducting, all this healing I'm doing, all this connection with my Father, if you like, so shall you do and more. And that's us now. That's the 2012 energetic, the end of the Mayan calendar. And all of this was carried through from Atlantean and before that Lemurian energy in different ways. The Lemurians didn't have technology that was necessarily outside of themselves in order to project forth and create a timeline, but what they did have was the very first memory of the fall. So as the energetics fell from the higher dimensional state on this planet into a third density planet, they held those memories, and those memories have been genetically passed down. So you're looking at genetic memory. And the Atlanteans did have technology outside of them in order to create a timeline and project forth incarnations, if you like. It's called death to birth conscious transfer, and they were able to consciously project themselves into incarnations, which is why every starseed will have a connection with the Lemurians and the Atlanteans, and whenever they hear the word Lemuria or Atlantis, they will instantly be triggered into a knowing that that is something to do with them. And that's why they have this, because it is in genetic memory and it is in incarnational memory. It's in both. So Lemurian would be metaphoric for the crystalline energy, and Atlantean would be metaphoric for the indigo energy. So if you like, the Lemurian energy is the acceptance, the harmony, the forgiveness and the gratitude and the love, and the Atlantean energy is the judgment, the focus, and the grounded feeling, the groundedness, the anchoring. And you could look at that in the brain presentation. The Lemurian would be the right brain, the right hemisphere of the brain, and the Atlantean would be the left hemisphere of the brain, if you want to put it into that context. Metaphor and that which is real within this timeline, within this history, merge together. And for your own learning, it doesn't matter whether you work with metaphor or whether you work with what is actually historically accurate. Historical accuracy changes depending on the timeline that you are on. If you jump timelines, you change your future and your past. So your past can be different. So the global historical past can be different. So again, multi layers here to discuss. So that's what happened yesterday when I was recording, after discussing Jeshua and Melchizedek and the Essene Brethren, which is a powerful energetic. Everything went off. So, and me doing that little jump, that was my husband's idea. He said, oh, I've got a really good idea. When you first start recording again, go like this, like you're all surprised, and I'll do some funky editing. So that's his bit, not mine. So let's get back to this analysis. Okay, so the next part of this. So on this bit here, the nine are still addressing the service to self energy, the service to, and that again is another something to look at. When the electricity went off, when the sockets tripped, because the nine are addressing the service to self, energetics, and the individuals within that structure, and the priests of darkness, powerful priests of darkness, and enlightened and illumined masters, they're addressing them directly. So it may well be that force is like pulling back and like, you will not address me this way, and bang go your electricity, cuts off your ability to record. As I said, it's nothing to be afraid of, because it then flips into the positive and turns into a teaching. So that's an example. I mean, that's the greatest way of teaching, is living by example. So I wouldn't be able to show you what living by example means if the electricity hadn't gone off. So one is grateful to that negative polarity for that specific situation. One doesn't sit there and think, oh no, you turned all my electrics off. Why did you do that? You're horrible. I was in the middle of recording. And then one really scared, they're out to get me. No, one just goes into, okay, That's good. That's another part of this reality. It will not affect the teaching. It will enhance the teaching. Thank you. And what you're really doing is working with your own shadow. When you do that, you're just simply integrating your ego self. That's it. That's what you're doing. It's all in you. It all comes back to you. You can see it as outside of you, but ultimately it is within you. So going back to the transmission, the 9 here are still addressing the service to self energy here. They're still addressing that negative polarization and the individuals within that structure. The Illuminati, the Cabal, the controllers, the dark workers, the elite, whatever you want to call them. All you did was suppress. You could never extinguish. And now the nets of your illusory suppression are no more. So all you did was suppress. So what they mean by that is that which was in an aware state within the service to others, positive, polarized, innocent beings upon this planet, as they fell down through those frequencies. So this first occurred within the Lemurian civilization. The crystalline energy, the same thing. Forgiveness, compassion, love, all of that was in abundance. And that energy as a code, as a collective race, so as a code, the crystalline energy, as a race, the Lemurians were the civilization at that time. That energy that they held, which we could look at as a DNA field, so this would be the 12-strand, complete, fully realized DNA structure with the 13 central point in place, the full spiral, moving into the 144 configuration, 144,000 configuration, also known as the 144,000 warriors of light. All of these things, that configuration was reduced, but it was reduced through suppression. The 9 say here you could never extinguish, so they couldn't just get rid of it. Let's just get rid of that DNA configuration. Let's get rid of compassion, love, forgiveness, harmony, and take it away from these humans as they incarnate, and it's gone. They can't do that. It's impossible because it's source energy. It's a source frequency. It's a repeating holographic fractal pattern within the DNA field from source, from original creation, and it cannot be extinguished. It's impossible because it's an infinite fractal. It is pure existence. It can't be extinguished, but it was suppressed by this group, this faction, this energy, this group of extraterrestrial beings, consciousness, however you want to explain it. It's all of those things and more. It was suppressed. So what that looks like in a DNA configuration is that quantum field into the 144,000, stemming from that 12 and that central 13 point within that DNA configuration, was suppressed down to 2. So we've got 2 DNA strands. That's the double helix. And because it's in the 2, the dualistic polarity, it was very difficult to move into the quantum field. The quantum comes with the 3, so you would need a triple helix DNA configuration in order to go quantum. So that was taken down and reduced down to 2. That's the 3rd dimension. That's the fall. That's the Lemurian fall that occurred within the Lemurian civilization from this beautiful multi-dimensional Garden of Eden paradise utopia reality down into the 3rd dimension. So it's the same sort of thing in the Bible, the Garden of Eden, and there's Adam and there's Eve, and Eve is tempted by the snake and she takes a bite from the apple and then she has all knowledge. That's the story, really. That's the story. It is a true story, but it is that story of Adam and Eve and the snake and the apple is just like 1% of the truth of what this is. when you understand that it's a true story and it's a presentation, you can then allow that to trigger you. And if you find fear in there, as in the snake, oh, that was a reptilian that tempted, reptilian extraterrestrial that tempted the female human. And yes, all of that's true, but you're still only fourth dimensional when you take that story. And it's the same thing as the service to self energies working to switch my electrics off so that I couldn't continue recording. It's the same thing. It's the ego self. It is the fall. And from a higher perspective, the fall was chosen by all the Lemurians, which are us. We chose the fall. That doesn't mean that we forgive those who infiltrated us and suppressed. So I've spoken about this before, and you can go back into other videos where I have analysed these transmissions, and I've discussed this before, and all of this is also in my books, specifically Divine Architecture and the Starseed Template, and also about the Atlantean projection that is very much in the Infinite Helix and the Emerald Flame. So I've spoken about this story before, so you can go and find out in those places more about this. But getting back to this analysis, all you did was suppress. So I've explained what that means, the suppression. You could never extinguish. So I've explained what that means. It cannot be extinguished. And now the nets of your illusory suppression are no more. So what that means is that when that DNA configuration was suppressed or reduced down from the 144,000 quantum field in a full 12 strand configuration down to 2, there had to be a continuation of suppression. It wasn't just like a magic trick, like that's it, it's 2. We've done our job, we can go off and do something else. It's a continuation. We have to create something that will generate a continued suppression. And that's the inverted matrix. And as I said in earlier parts to this analysis, the service to self structure needed to have the energetic of the everyday person, of the general population, and would siphon energy from them in order to sustain their inverted matrix system. Now, it only takes a few individuals to wake up out of that inverted matrix system, that controlled system. It only takes a few people to wake up from that, access the memories, and then start to deliver the knowings that they have, the teachings that they have, the creations that they have, for those to start to reverberate amongst others and wake those others up. And then you get to a point of critical mass whereby this service to self faction can no longer siphon enough energy from the remaining population that are still entrapped within the matrix in order to sustain this reduced, suppressed DNA configuration. And that is what has happened. Enough people have woken up, they have moved into this memory awakening, and that created a critical mass. A critical mass which was enough to take away that energy that was being siphoned. It's too weak now. It's not strong enough for the service to self individuals to utilize. That energy is watered down because so many have awakened. They're no longer in the system. They're no longer in the matrix. Even though there are lots and lots of people still entrapped within that matrix system, it isn't about the number of individuals, it's about the consciousness they hold. So every time someone awakens and goes quantum, they start to reconfigure that DNA structure. They're no longer at the double helix, they've moved to the triple helix, beyond the triple helix, and then they move further and further into other configurations, which is the same thing as beyond the theta brainwave state. When they start to do that, they can't be siphoned, they can't be hijacked, and the service to self structure can't maintain those nets of suppression. So suppression has gone, and then all of a sudden everyone is free to wake up their DNA. The only blocking now is coming from individuals that block themselves because they haven't quite found a way to integrate the shadow side and move out of that trapping system. And obviously the service to self groups are still trying to do what they can to further their agenda, but as the 9 say here, your nets of illusory suppression are no more. So those nets that were continually generating a double helix configuration within the DNA are no more. There is no more generation. It takes time for everybody to wake up to a higher DNA strand configuration. It takes time to move out of the double helix, and many individuals don't like the feeling of that movement. They want to stay where they were, even if it's painful and it causes them suffering and boredom and frustration. They don't want to. They think they want to, but ultimately they don't want to move out of that. But now the energy is sort of flooding in from all angles to enable that DNA configuration to flourish. So the 9 are addressing the service to self groups here when they say this, specifically and directly to them. They're doing this so that if there is anyone within that system watching the video or listening to that transmission, they pick up that that address. But also, as I said in the previous analysis, this gives you, the individual listening to this gives you the perspective of the service to self group in the first place, so that you can understand what's going on there. You don't have to understand, but there are many, many starseeds that do want to understand and do want to know why the service to self groups do what they do and what their perspective is. That way you can understand what's going on. When you see what's going on in the world, when you turn on your television set and you, if you've got one, and you see what's going on politically, financially in the world, and all the disasters that are occurring, or all the great, wonderful creations that are occurring, you can actually see what's going on when you understand the perspective of service to others and service to self. When you understand both those polarizations, you can understand what's happening, and it gives you more information within which to make an informed decision about your own reality. So that was the address to the service to self groups. The next part of the transmission moves back to then it moves back to addressing the starseeds and the awakened and aware ones. So I will finish this analysis video here, and I will be back with more analysis with the next one. So thank you very much for listening, and I will see you again soon. Bye.
In this transmission from the White-Winged Collective Consciousness of 9, I, Magenta Pixie, bring forward information specific to utilising the rose gold flame as antidote to 5G, EMFs, chemicals, chemtrails, and similar. The presented template utilises the Schumann resonance, and the technique is alchemical unification. In this book, the 9 discuss synchronicity, discernment skills, and understanding of discordance and disharmony within truth and lightworker communities. They present a workable model of expression, assisting the spiritual explorer in creating a necessary toolkit. This allows the individual to construct a shield, bringing safety, harmony, expansion, and cohesive sovereignty into their own personal reality and their matrix field. I am pleased to present my new short book, The Black Box Program and the Rose Gold Flame as Antidote.